The president has sounded off yet again about the Fed chair, while global markets await a potential Supreme Court opinion today about tariffs. And for that, we'll get to Eamon Javers this morning in Washington. Went through this on Friday, Eamon. We'll see if today's the day.
We were all dressed up with no place to go on Friday, Carl. We'll see what happens today. Let me start with the president's comments last night. He gave this interview to CBS News, continued to pile on insults on Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. He said that Powell is either corrupt or incompetent in that interview last night. And here's what else he had to say.
He's been a lousy Fed chairman. He was reappointed by Biden. I was a little surprised at that because I didn't think he really earned his stripes. He's been too high on interest rates.
So we'll continue to follow the bouncing ball on that relationship throughout the day and see if we get any more developments in terms of this Department of Justice investigation. Meantime, as you point out, 10 o'clock, we are expecting possible decisions from the Supreme Court just about an hour from now. Again, we don't know in advance what the Supreme Court is going to do, what decisions might actually come down. So we will be standing by for this tariff decision. Take a look at what's at stake here. We have a graphic prepared which shows you just how many billions of dollars are on the line here. Remember, what the Supreme Court is going to be deciding here, whenever they do issue that decision, is on the constitutionality of the IEEPA tariffs. Not all of the tariffs, but just the Liberation Day tariffs and the ones that he used this law for. So overall tariff revenue, $251 billion. The IEEPA piece, $133 billion in terms of what's at stake, what's been collected this year. An interesting comment from the president earlier this week that you might want to just kind of put a pin in, which was he said that the stakes here are so high, the amount of money that the United States government would have to pay back in terms of refunds to companies who paid those tariffs during the course of 2025 is so high we might not be able to pay it, in effect, is what the president said. Other people in the administration have said if the Supreme Court decides against the United States, they will issue refunds to companies. But that comment from the president, guys, makes me wonder if there could be some sort of lag in payment or some delay or some fight over whether or not the U.S. government is actually going to pay those refunds. So we'll watch what the decision is, how that's structured, and then how the administration responds in the immediate aftermath if it goes against them, and do they commit to making those payments to those companies, because it could be material for some of these companies who paid a lot of money in tariffs last year.
Way, Eamon, of saying what the president said, and that is we're screwed. Those were his words.
Yes. Right. I mean, it's a huge problem for the administration. The president likes the flexibility of using IEEPA, which hasn't been used for tariffs in the past, but he likes it because it's nearly unilateral executive authority in his interpretation of the law. The other way you put tariffs in place requires you have to go through a lengthy and convoluted process of conducting a study and then having a time period. All of that, ties his hands a little bit more. The president says he's been able to bring foreign countries to the table in negotiations about all sorts of things using that unilateral tariff threat. And if he has to use this other method, then it could be much more cumbersome. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has said, look, if it goes against us, we have other ways of enacting these tariffs, and we'll just simply change it to a fee or some other arrangement, and so we'll effectively be collecting the same amount of money. It'll just be a lot more convoluted, cumbersome, and time-consuming, and that means the president doesn't have the flexibility that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't think that most economists will tell you there's not a big macro impact of this decision, even if it doesn't go the president's way, because the White House has been quite clear that they'll just find other levers to pull when it comes to collecting these tariffs. Yeah, it's interesting. The tone you get from Scott Bessent on this is, well, it would be bad if the Supreme Court ruled against us here, but we have other ways of dealing with this. If you listen to the president, his hair's on fire on this. I mean, he is really appalled at the idea that the Supreme Court might rule against them and that they would have to reconstruct the entire tariff regimen that they put in place over the past nearly year now. But I think it's, if you are an investor in one of these companies that paid all this money, you might want to sort of back out your calculations and figure out how much they could be getting in a check from the U.S. government and when that check might be coming in. Might be material for some of these companies, so a lot of CEOs are going to be watching this to see what happens. And, of course, a lot of foreign countries will be watching this to see what happens, because that impacts whether or not the president can really have his hand on that tariff tiller in a really direct, immediate way every single day.
day of the week. You saw him just this week threaten to impose tariffs on any country that does business with Iran. That's the kind of flexibility he likes to have, and it's the kind of flexibility that might be sort of hands tied in the future if the Supreme Court goes against him in about an hour's time.
Kalshi's only given him, Carl, a 28.9% chance of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Trump tariffs. So they're betting the other way.
That feels about right.
Yeah, I guess, Eamon, so next week, the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments, I think the 20th and 21st, and the 21st is the key one for Wall Street as well, because that's when they're supposed to hear on Lisa Cook. And a lot of the research I've read actually suggests that the Lisa Cook case is even more important than they're watching this Powell investigation when it comes to implications for Fed independence. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the Lisa Cook case is all about, this question of for cause. What does it mean that the president can fire somebody from the Fed for cause, quote unquote? Does that mean some malfeasance on the job? Does that mean some malfeasance that they committed before they took the job? Does that mean the president just doesn't like the cut of their jib and he can fire them basically because the cause is he feels like it? That is flexibility that the president obviously wants to have. And the question is whether he'll be able to have it or not, or whether he'll be constrained. The president has a maximalist view of presidential authority. And we'll see the old checks and balances kick in here and restrain that in terms of the Supreme Court or not. And that applies to, that position on the Supreme Court. And also, I think, you back out of that into this Jay Powell fight and whether or not Powell will step down. How many seats on the Federal Reserve does the president get to fill this year is a very interesting question for Fed watchers.